Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching, or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. When Leaves of Grass was first published in 1855, it emerged not merely as a collection of poems, but as a bold declaration of literary revolution. Walt Whitman, a self-taught journalist and poet, released it at his own expense, seeking not just to share his words, but to reshape the very fabric of American identity. This book was radical, not only in its free verse form and vivid sensuality, but in its spirit. Whitman wasn't just writing poems, he was building a new poetic language, one that embraced the body and the soul, the common and the divine, the urban and the pastoral, the self and the collective. From its very first edition, Leaves of Grass provoked admiration and outrage. Its most famous poem, Song of Myself, placed Whitman squarely at the center of the poetic experience, celebrating the self not in isolation, but as a vessel for all of humanity. The poet's body became America's body, his breath, the wind across its plains. Whitman's embrace of democracy, his sensual, often erotic, imagery, and his transcendent spirituality defied the moral and literary conventions of his day. His work was banned in parts of the country. Critics called it obscene, yet others saw in Whitman a prophet of a new world, a bard of the American experiment. Whitman continually revised and expanded Leaves of Grass throughout his life, transforming it from a slim volume of 12 poems into a sprawling, life-spanning opus by the time of its final edition in 1892. This wasn't just a book. It was a living document of one man's evolving soul and of a nation still discovering its own. To summarize Leaves of Grass is no easy task. It lacks a linear plot or defined characters in the traditional sense. Instead, we find recurring voices, motifs, and settings, echoes of the sea, the fields, the city streets, and the Civil War. We meet Whitman's America, workers, lovers, soldiers, mothers, children, slaves, sailors, and strangers. All are embraced in a radical inclusivity, a cosmic democracy. And always, standing in the center like a lighthouse in the storm, is the poet himself, celebrating, mourning, becoming. In this 10-part series, we'll journey through Whitman's poetic world as it unfolds across the major sections and evolving editions of Leaves of Grass. We'll explore the themes of identity, nature, death, sexuality, war, and the divine. And we'll do so not just with analysis, but with a sense of storytelling. Because even without a traditional plot, Leaves of Grass tells the story of America, and of one man's vast, generous, unyielding song. I celebrate myself and sing myself. So begins the journey not just of a poem, but of a soul opening itself wide to the world. Whitman's voice bursts forth like sunlight through fog, announcing that this is no ordinary song. It's a communion, a merging of body and spirit, poet and reader, self and other. And what I assume you shall assume, he tells us, drawing us into his breath, his heartbeat, his America. Song of Myself, the towering centerpiece of Leaves of Grass, is more than a poem. It's a declaration of unity. Whitman moves fluidly between observing the grass underfoot and contemplating the cosmos. He watches children play, then meditates on the soul's immortality. The grass itself becomes a symbol, the handkerchief of the Lord, perhaps, or the beautiful uncut hair of graves. Life and death, body and soul, not separate realms for Whitman. They are threads in the same eternal weave. In these opening stanzas, we meet the persona who will guide us throughout much of Leaves of Grass, a man at once intimate and infinite. He is the lover in the bed, the traveler on the road, the witness of a slave's punishment, the silent mourner beside a coffin. He is you, he is me. Whitman tears down the traditional barrier between poet and reader. He speaks directly. You shall not look through my eyes either, nor take things from me. / you shall listen to all sides and filter them from yourself. This radical invitation is both empowering and humbling. Whitman refuses to impose meaning, he offers presence. His vision of democracy isn't merely political, it's existential. Every person contains multitudes, and those multitudes deserve recognition. He walks among laborers, lovers, mothers, and martyrs, and finds in each the divine spark. The scent of these pits aroma finer than prayer. He writes in a shocking yet reverent embrace of the human form. Nature plays no small role here. Whitman's earth is alive and sacred. He bathes in rivers, lies naked in the grass, tastes the salt air. His communion with the natural world is not nostalgic, it's immediate, raw, and erotic. The body is not a shameful vessel to be denied, but a divine expression of the soul's longing. In Whitman's America, sensuality is spiritual, and the sacred is found in sweat and sun and sex. There are moments of profound stillness, too. Whitman pauses to contemplate the mysteries that cannot be spoken. Do I contradict myself? / very well then I contradict myself. / I am large, I contain multitudes. He is not afraid of contradiction, of complexity. In fact, he thrives on it. His poetry doesn't resolve, it expands. It invites us to hold paradox without fear. And then there is the sea. Again and again, the ocean appears in Whitman's work as both a symbol and a setting. In Song of Myself, he listens to the surf, watches the ships, imagines death not as an end, but as a merging with something vast and eternal. And to die is different from what anyone supposed, and luckier. As this opening poem stretches toward its close, Whitman grows quieter, more reflective. He acknowledges the mystery of his message, that it may not be understood now, but it will remain. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. The poet dissolves into the earth, into the poem, into the reader. He becomes part of the cycle. He plants himself in us. Part 1 of Leaves of Grass is not a prologue. It is the heartbeat. It sets the tone for everything to come, a voice that is both singular and universal, a vision that sees holiness in the ordinary, and a spirit that refuses to be constrained by dogma or decorum. It is an offering, a celebration, a song. The song does not end. It only shifts, swells, and spirals outward, carrying us deeper into Walt Whitman's unfolding vision of America and the self. After the intimate, celebratory explosion of the opening poem, the journey continues into poems that stretch their arms across the continent, invoking workers, wanderers, rivers, railroads, and the heartbeat of a nation forging itself in steel, sweat, and sunlight. This is no abstract landscape. It's tactile, humming with the pulse of daily labor and the dignity of ordinary lives. The poet turns his attention to the world beyond the self, yet never truly departs from it. In I Sing the Body Electric, he continues the reverent embrace of the physical, presenting the human body not just as a shell for the soul, but as a divine architecture unto itself. Every curve, muscle, breath, and pulse is sacred. He catalogs the body with the same awe one might use to describe cathedrals or stars. The man's beard, the woman's hips, the strong legs of a laborer, the mother's arm cradling a child, all become symbols of universal beauty and strength. There is no hierarchy of bodies here, no moral weight assigned to form or age. Each is a miracle. Each is an extension of the cosmic whole. He writes of a slave being sold at auction, not with clinical detachment, but with fury and reverence. The enslaved man's body, displayed and priced, is not a commodity in Whitman's eyes. It is holy. The poem dares the reader to see what society tries to obscure, that there is no such thing as a lesser person, no justification for cruelty, no distance between them and us. The poet strips away illusion, inviting the reader to see what he sees, that the soul shines just as brightly in every face. His America is not limited to cities or countrysides, not confined to whiteness or wealth. It is expansive, inclusive, contradictory, and real. He walks through hospitals, shipyards, and factories. He stands in the sun beside farmers, rides wagons with pioneers, and watches children grow in dusty lanes. He marvels at the anonymous faces on crowded streets. The nation is not an abstract flag. It is a body made of many bodies, a chorus of individual songs forming one great, imperfect harmony. As the poems continue, time and movement become central. There's a constant sense of flux, of wheels turning, of ships moving through rivers, of trains slicing through landscapes. Whitman is obsessed with motion, not because it symbolizes change, but because it embodies life itself. To move is to exist. To journey is to awaken. And so the poems themselves become vehicles, rhythmic, surging, and unapologetically free. In Faces, Whitman turns his attention to the multitude of expressions he has encountered: faces of grief, of joy, of weariness, of ecstasy. He catalogs them with poetic tenderness, reminding us that every line etched into a forehead, every flicker of emotion across a cheek, tells a story. There is no such thing as an unimportant face. They are books, portraits, testaments to life lived and still unfolding. The tone deepens, occasionally turning elegiac. There are quiet moments amid the exuberance, reflections on death, not as a fearful end, but as a sacred merging. To Whitman, death is not a wall but a door, not a tragedy but a transformation. He does not deny its sorrow, but he refuses to grant it power over life. Even in the act of dying, there is beauty, mystery, a kind of return. The body decays, but the song continues. The breath becomes wind, the blood becomes river, the soul becomes starlight. Throughout these poems, there is a sense of profound listening. Whitman does not simply speak, he absorbs, he observes, he reflects. He listens to the voices of children, of elders, of laborers, of the dead, of the earth itself. His poetic voice is not just a cry, it is an echo of everything around him. The boundaries between subject and observer vanish. The poet does not merely witness America, he becomes America. And yet, the self remains central, not as an ego, but as a conduit. When Whitman speaks of I, it is not a single man, but a collective experience. The I contains the riverboat captain and the prostitute, the dying soldier and the blushing lover. The poet is everyone, and everyone is the poet. There is radical compassion in this, a democracy of spirit, a vision that shatters walls. He returns again and again to the idea that the body and soul are not at war, but in harmony. This idea flies in the face of the puritanical values that shaped much of American culture in his time. Whitman refuses to separate the sacred from the sensual. To him, a kiss is as holy as a prayer, a bare chest as spiritual as a hymn. His poems breathe with desire, not merely for physical touch, but for connection, for union, for communion. The ocean reappears, vast and beckoning. It becomes a symbol of the eternal, the unknowable, the divine. Standing beside it, the poet is small and infinite all at once. He hears it speak in whispers and crashes, in silence and storm. And like the sea, his poems do not end neatly. They roll, break, surge, then recede. Their rhythms mirror nature, unpredictable, immersive, true. As the second wave of poems swells and carries us forward, we find ourselves no longer reading a collection, but participating in a vision. We are not outside the poetry, we are inside it. We walk with the poet, breathe his air, feel his heartbeat. His America becomes ours, his wonder our own. In this moment, we understand what Leaves of Grass truly is, not a book, but a mirror. A mirror in which we see the divine not in angels or abstract ideals, but in each other, in the worker's hands, in the lover's eyes, in the poet's voice, in our own. The journey rolls onward like a river gaining momentum, drawing us deeper into the vast, untamed territory of Whitman's poetic landscape. The words continue to swell with life, sometimes delicate and tender, other times wild and thunderous. There is a shifting rhythm here, a pendulum that swings between exaltation and introspection, between the external world and the internal cosmos. At its center remains the poet himself, not as a distant narrator, but as a presence among presences, walking, watching, loving, and becoming. One of the most compelling features of this section is Whitman's expanding awareness of time, not only the time of his own life, but of the history pulsing beneath America's surface. In the poem, Song of the Open Road, he beckons the reader forward with a hand outstretched, inviting not just travel, but transformation. It is an invitation to throw off the anchors of convention, to abandon the safety of stillness, and to step into the unknown with joy. The road is literal, a dusty trail across the land, but also metaphysical. It represents the arc of a soul's journey toward enlightenment, selfhood, and radical freedom. There is an electrifying optimism that flows through these lines. The world is not something to be feared or conquered, but embraced with open arms. Whitman is the poet of welcome. He welcomes the morning, the stranger, the lover, the unknown future. His voice rises with the confidence of a man who has discovered that the greatest adventure lies not in reaching a destination, but in walking the road itself. Each step, each breath, each moment contains its own universe. And yet, this isn't blind idealism. Even amid his exaltation, Whitman never forgets the complexity of the world around him. He acknowledges pain, imperfection, and struggle. But instead of turning away, he enfolds them into the grand fabric of life. He writes not just of beauty, but of blemish, and in doing so, makes both sacred. To him, the broken is just as worthy of praise as the whole. In Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, he reflects on the unity of time and humanity. He stands on the deck of a boat, watching the water flow beneath and the city rise beyond, but his gaze reaches far beyond the moment. He speaks to those yet to come, readers who will one day stand where he stands, see what he sees. The poem becomes a bridge, not just across a river, but across generations. Time collapses. Distance dissolves. The poet touches the future and finds himself still there. It is one of the most profound meditations in the collection, an act of poetic immortality in which he reminds us that the things we feel now are not new, not isolated. Our joys and doubts, our moments of awe and confusion, have all been felt before and will be felt again. And in that shared experience, we are all deeply connected. This section also introduces a stronger undercurrent of spiritual yearning. Whitman is not content with traditional notions of religion. He reveres no dogma, bows to no institution. His spirituality is not confined to churches or scriptures. It lives in nature, in the human body, in the touch of a hand, the call of a bird, the kiss of sunlight on skin. He finds the divine not in distance, but in nearness, not in abstraction, but in intimacy. His God is the grass, the air, the earth, and his prayers are written in the lines of his poetry. There's a sense of sacred ordinariness running through every image. A blade of grass becomes a sermon. The sound of footsteps on a wooden floor echoes with cosmic meaning. Whitman's genius lies in his ability to elevate the everyday, to draw our attention not to the dramatic, but to the deeply human moments we often overlook. He honors the worker mending shoes, the woman nursing a baby, the man bathing by a riverbank. These are not background characters, they are the soul of the poem. Love, too, surges more powerfully through these lines. Not just romantic love, though that pulses steadily beneath the surface, but a universal, encompassing affection. Whitman's love is fearless, boundaryless. He speaks to men with an intimacy that defied 19th century norms, his voice tender and unabashedly sensual. There is a bravery in his affection, a refusal to apologize for tenderness between souls, regardless of gender or role. And yet, he never explains himself. He simply is. And in being, he challenges the reader to let go of their own judgments and simply feel. Throughout this portion of the work, there is a growing sense of communion. Whitman does not stand apart from the reader. He walks beside us, his voice soft in one moment, booming in the next. He is at times the teacher, the prophet, the companion, the lover. But always, he is present. Always, he is deeply human. And in this humanity lies the heart of Leaves of Grass. It is not a monument to perfection or certainty. It is a celebration of life in all its sprawling, contradictory beauty. It honors chaos and order, light and shadow, birth and death. It sings not just of triumph, but of struggle. Not just of unity, but of division, and the yearning to bridge it. As the verses ripple forward, one begins to feel less like a reader and more like a traveler. The road winds onward, the ferry glides across water, the sun rises and sets in slow rhythms. We are moving not just through pages, but through Whitman's vision of existence. A vision where nothing is wasted, nothing is outside the realm of poetry. Where the act of living, in all its messy glory, is the greatest poem of all. The movement through Whitman's work becomes more intimate, more deeply layered, as his verses shift from outward observation to inward revelation. There is a noticeable pause in the thunderous momentum that carried the earlier passages, and what emerges now is a reflective calm like still water holding the sky. Whitman begins to probe the deeper, quieter territories of the self, offering a lens not just into his identity, but into the shared emotional landscape that binds all people together. This is the portion of Leaves of Grass where the poet no longer merely catalogs life, he begins to live within it on the page. The language slows, deepens, becoming tender and lyrical. He observes not only the vastness of the world, but the microscopic truths of the human spirit. Here, we find ourselves immersed in Whitman's meditations on memory, mortality, and the soul's yearning for permanence in a world built on impermanence. A key passage in this section is Out of the Cradle Endlessly Rocking, a poem both personal and universal. It begins with the simple scene of a boy walking along the shore, but quickly unfurls into a memory of love, loss, and awakening. Whitman uses the story of a bird, a male mockingbird calling out endlessly for his lost mate, as a metaphor for the poet's own discovery of grief, art, and voice. The bird's cries become the boy's initiation into the deeper truths of existence. Death, longing, and the power of expression all interweave here, forming one of Whitman's most haunting and musical explorations of emotional inheritance. This is not the celebratory tone found earlier. This is a quieter voice, whispering truths instead of shouting them. But the intensity remains. In fact, it sharpens. There is an urgency in Whitman's realization that art, specifically poetry, is born not from ease or comfort, but from the aching spaces in the human heart. The loss of the bird's mate echoes within the boy, triggering not despair, but the need to sing. This is Whitman's deepest artistic credo, that sorrow must be sung, not silenced. As the poems unfold, we see Whitman attempting to reconcile this new awareness with the world he has praised so exuberantly before. The result is a richer, more textured tapestry of emotion. He begins to meditate on death, not as a tragedy, but as a vital part of the cosmic rhythm. In the poem, When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloomed, written in mourning for the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, we see the poet at his most elegiac, walking through the shadows of national sorrow with a branch of lilac in his hand. The poem is not only a personal lament for the fallen president, it is a lament for a country torn by war and for the unavoidable reality of death itself. Yet even here, Whitman refuses to descend into hopelessness. Grief is given space, but it is not the final word. Nature, once again, becomes a source of solace and connection. The lilac blooms. The thrush sings. The stars wheel overhead. The universe continues, not coldly, but with quiet assurance. In this balance of mourning and renewal, Whitman finds his equilibrium. He suggests that death is not an end, but a folding into something larger, a return, a transformation. There is a sacredness to these verses, and not in the religious sense. Whitman's spirituality does not rest in any one tradition or deity. Instead, he finds the divine in the cycles of the earth and the unspoken wisdom of the body. The poem, The Sleepers, is a testament to this, a strange and beautiful descent into dream-like vision. He walks among the sleeping of the world, the poor, the imprisoned, the sick, the forgotten, and sees not their weakness, but their wholeness. In dreams, they are free. In sleep, they are united. It's a tender, even mystical vision of equality, where all hierarchies dissolve and all souls rest under the same moonlight. This part of the work also contains Whitman's deeper forays into the identity of the self. The earlier bold declarations of I now evolve into a more nuanced exploration of what it means to be an individual within a collective. He speaks of himself, yes, but with the growing realization that his self is braided with others, The divisions between poet and reader, self and stranger, begin to dissolve. The poem, I Sing the Body Electric, becomes a hymn not only to physicality, but to shared humanity. Each limb, each pulse, each breath is praised, not in isolation, but as part of a larger, breathing community. What is revolutionary about this celebration of the body is the way Whitman refuses shame. He writes with a radical frankness about sensuality and sexuality, but never veers into vulgarity or concealment. There is purity in his gaze, reverence in his language. He does not describe the human form to titillate, but to honor. The body becomes the outward manifestation of the soul, and to embrace one is to embrace the other. Male and female, young and old, every variation of human form is sacred in his eyes. There are no taboos, no forbidden touches. Everything is natural. Everything belongs. In these pages, we begin to see Whitman fully inhabiting his role not only as a poet of democracy and nature, but as a witness to the complexities of being alive. He does not offer easy answers or polished philosophies. Instead, he shares his evolving thoughts with vulnerability and courage. His poetry becomes a mirror, not one that flatters, but one that reflects the full spectrum of human experience. What emerges most powerfully from this section is a deepening empathy. Whitman listens more closely, speaks more softly, and looks more clearly. He does not retreat from the world's pain, but walks with it. And through that journey, he discovers that the poet's task is not merely to praise what is beautiful or declare what is true, but to hold space for all that is broken and to sing it whole. The rhythm of the book deepens, stretching into places of contemplation and prophecy. Walt Whitman begins to wear his voice like an old coat, familiar, comfortable, but with room for winds that blow in from unseen horizons. His gaze turns toward the unrecorded, the everyday workers, the forgotten, the wounded, the wild-hearted wanderers. And with each word, he restores dignity to their lives. These are the people who make up the sinews of America, and in Whitman's lines, they are neither low nor high, but essential. He sees no difference between the mechanic tightening a bolt and the scholar penning a speech. Both pulse with equal light. Both are threads in the same national fabric. This is a poet obsessed with unity, not uniformity, a vital distinction. There is a sense that he's trying to reconcile the multiplicities of a young, fractured country by stitching its stories together in verse. The farmer in the field, the sailor on the deck, the woman nursing her child, the wounded soldier, they all become elements of a grand human mosaic. And through Whitman's generous lens, their stories are elevated, celebrated, made sacred. He does not merely write about them. He writes as if he is them, as if their breath moves through his own lungs. This phase of the work pulses with democratic idealism, not the kind born of politics and platforms, but of deeper, almost spiritual belief in shared worth. Whitman does not worship institutions, he reveres individuals. His America is not defined by boundaries or flags, but by the bloodlines of its people, their sweat, their struggle, their dreams, their sex, their silence. The inclusiveness of his verse is not performative, it is innate. It is who he is. It is how he sees. One can feel the muscles of the language flexing in these poems, as though the poet were trying to hold the entire continent in his arms. The ambition is staggering. He doesn't just want to describe life, he wants to embody it. And so he casts himself into everything, He is the blacksmith and the prostitute. He is the mother and the dying soldier. He is the rivers, the clouds, the grasses. This immersion is not ego, it is empathy. A radical, revolutionary empathy that dares to dissolve the self in the name of connection. There is a raw, unfiltered quality to the poetry in this part of the book. The lines tumble over each other, pulsing with desire, sweat, hunger, hope. Whitman becomes increasingly fearless in his depictions of the erotic. He does not tiptoe around desire. He names it, praises it, lifts it out of the shadows. His sensual verses are not confined to the act of love, but expand into a broader worship of touch, sensation, proximity. He believes the soul is reached not in spite of the body, but through it. And so the body is exalted, not merely for its beauty or utility, but for its ability to house the sacred. One of the defining characteristics of this phase is the layering of opposites. Whitman embraces contradiction, not as a flaw, but as a feature of truth. He is the poet of both darkness and light, birth and death, flesh and spirit. In a world obsessed with order, he welcomes chaos. In a culture trained to compartmentalize, he insists on wholeness. His lines often hold two truths at once, resisting the reader's desire to simplify or settle. He reminds us that humans are complex, layered, and often in conflict with themselves. And that is not a weakness, but a source of vitality. Amid the rapture, there is also restlessness. The poems begin to move like wind across an unsettled prairie, searching, swaying, pausing, then stirring again. Whitman becomes more questioning. He wonders what comes next. He feels time pressing against him. Death no longer feels distant. It is near, it is part of him. But even here, he does not flinch. Instead, he welcomes it as a friend, a companion on the road. His relationship with death is not tragic, but tender. He speaks of it as one speaks to a lover at twilight, with quiet reverence. In passages like Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, time itself becomes fluid. The poet addresses not only those around him, but those yet to come. He reaches across generations, whispering through the page to readers 100 years away. He anticipates the solitude of the modern soul and offers himself as a companion, a bridge across the loneliest of distances. He says, "I see you, I know you, I was you." This is one of Whitman's most enduring gifts, his refusal to allow the reader to feel alone. Even in vast silence, his voice remains, a tide that touches every shore. His attention to the natural world continues to astonish, not because he writes about trees and rivers, but because he writes with them. The landscape is not a backdrop, it is a character, a living presence that breathes alongside the human. Grass, sand, sky, and sea, each is endowed with soul. And they speak, if one knows how to listen. Whitman listens, and he teaches the reader to listen too. He shows that the world is full of messages, that the divine hides in plain sight in a leaf, a wave, a footprint. This section also shows the poet maturing. The youthful thunder has softened into something more reflective, but no less powerful. He begins to look backward, to take stock. There's a sense that he is preparing not for an end, but for an arrival at something deeper, a homecoming of spirit. The voice is less concerned with convincing and more interested in communing. He is no longer declaring who he is asking who we are. There's a line in these pages, simple, almost whispered, that captures so much of Whitman's ethos. I do not ask the wounded person how he feels. I myself become the wounded person. That is the heart of Leaves of Grass. Not sympathy, but shared breath. Not observation, but embodiment. Whitman does not write from above or below. He writes from beside. Through this radical positioning, the reader is not simply reading poetry, they are experiencing it. They are invited not only to understand, but to inhabit. And in that space, something extraordinary happens. The page disappears. The time collapses. The poet and the reader merge, and for a moment, long or brief, the world feels whole. The pages unfold like a rising sun. Not hurried, but inevitable, washing light over every shadowed place. There is a newfound stillness here, a matured calm that doesn't lack intensity, but has traded the fire of youth for the steady glow of endurance. Walt Whitman now walks through his own work with a deeper awareness of time's cycles, not just the passage of hours, but the circular nature of birth, death, and renewal. He has traveled through the exaltations of the self, the celebrations of the human body, the raw exposures of longing, and now he rests in the vast field of continuity. In these poems, the lines feel more spacious, as though the poet has stepped back and let the world breathe. There is less urgency to name everything, and more comfort in simply observing. He watches the tides roll in and out, the moon wax and wane, the grass grow and wither and return again. His words mirror this natural cadence. There's an ease in his acceptance of change, of impermanence, of the endless flow of life beyond comprehension. And yet, even in acceptance, there is wonder. He remains awed by the everyday miracles, the scent of leaves, the call of birds, the shared glance between strangers. This part of the work deepens Whitman's belief that divinity is not distant or abstract, but immediate and tangible. God, to him, is not confined to churches or holy texts, but revealed in the smallest acts of existence. A child's voice, a blade of grass, a kiss on the cheek, all become holy. All become evidence of the sacred alive in the material world. He calls on the reader to look again at the ordinary, to see not just with the eyes, but with the soul. Through him, the mundane becomes luminous. His language becomes more reflective, even nostalgic at moments. He returns in memory to places he has walked, people he has loved, and the selves he once inhabited. These recollections are not sentimental, but reverent, as though he is blessing the path that brought him here. He does not resist the past, nor does he cling to it. Instead, he invites it to walk beside him, to inform his present without possessing it. There's a kind of reconciliation happening between the man he was and the man he has become, between ambition and acceptance. The eroticism that once roared through earlier sections now settles into a quiet intimacy. Desire hasn't faded, it has deepened. He speaks not only of the heat of the body, but of the tenderness found in nearness, in shared silence, in the simple act of being with another. He celebrates connection in all its forms, physical, emotional, spiritual. To Whitman, love is not a possession or transaction, but a way of dissolving the boundary between self and other. It is the most human and most divine gesture we can offer. A new thread begins to weave its way into the poems, the presence of war. The drumbeats of conflict, both literal and metaphorical, start to sound in the distance. He does not yet linger in the carnage, but he senses its approach. And even here, he refuses to dehumanize. The soldiers are not statistics or symbols, they are individuals. They are sons, lovers, poets, laborers. He looks into their eyes and sees not only bravery or fear, but the totality of what it means to be alive. He prepares, subtly, for mourning, not just for bodies lost, but for innocence, for hope, for the illusion that we are beyond the reach of violence. Still, his faith remains, not in governments or institutions, but in the enduring pulse of the human spirit. He believes in the resilience of the people, their ability to rebuild, to forgive, to rise again. His optimism is not naive, but hard-earned. He does not ignore suffering, he folds it into his vision of growth. For every loss, there is a return. For every fall, a rise. Nature teaches this lesson again and again, and Whitman, ever the student of the earth, believes it applies to nations as well as to individuals. There is also a growing sense of legacy in these poems. He begins to write with the awareness that his voice may one day outlast his body. He speaks to the future more directly, as if placing messages in bottles and casting them into time. He imagines readers decades, even centuries away, holding his book and finding comfort in his words. It is a profoundly generous act to reach out to those who are not yet born and offer them kinship. He assures them that he too struggled, questioned, doubted, and hoped, that they are not alone, that their joys and fears have already been felt and survived. As the imagery unfolds, it becomes increasingly cosmic. He lifts his gaze from the soil to the stars. The vastness of the universe does not make him feel small, it makes him feel included. He does not see the stars as distant lights, but as part of the same body that includes him. He is made of the same elements. He is kin to comets and oceans. There is no hierarchy in his cosmology, only belonging. And from this sense of shared being, he draws strength. He is not afraid of oblivion because he believes nothing is truly lost. All things return. All things continue. This phase also contains some of the most musical lines of the collection. Whitman's ear for cadence becomes even more refined. His verses don't march, they float. They echo. They sing. It is a kind of free verse hymn, a song of earth and flesh and breath. He trusts the sound of his words to carry meaning as much as the meaning itself. The result is poetry that feels alive, not just read, but experienced. What emerges most clearly is a deep, abiding gratitude. Gratitude not for wealth or fame, but for the simple fact of being alive. For the ability to feel, to taste, to touch, to grieve, to heal. Whitman's vision of life is not an escape from pain, but an embrace of everything that pain reveals about love, vulnerability, and impermanence. He does not flinch from the harsh edges of experience. He gathers them in, presses them to his chest, and sings. This section of the book feels like standing at the center of a vast circle, surrounded by past, present, and future. And from that place, Whitman offers his hand to the reader, inviting them to stand beside him, to look outward, and to believe, even in doubt, that existence itself is a kind of miracle. The journey continues, but now it bends toward introspection with a deeper solemnity, like the mellow tone of a distant bell echoing through twilight. Whitman's voice grows quieter, yet no less powerful. The landscape of his verse widens to encompass not just the personal and the national, but the eternal. Time stretches further in both directions. He looks back over the shoulder of humanity and ahead into its uncertain future. In this space, he meditates not only on the self, or the body, or democracy, but on death and the soul, and what it means to persist beyond the visible. His poetry takes on the quality of twilight, half light, half shadow. Death, no longer an abstract concept, appears as a constant companion, not a foe but a teacher. He speaks of the lovely and soothing death as if greeting a long-lost friend. Here, mortality is not cast as a grim reaper, but as a gateway. He welcomes the idea of the body being returned to the earth, the atoms dissolving back into the soil and air, feeding the world that once fed them. There is a tender sensuality to this vision, a merging of self with the natural elements, with no fear, only embrace. It becomes clear that Whitman's entire worldview is rooted in unity. And in this part of the work, unity takes on an even more metaphysical form. He dissolves the distinctions between body and spirit, between life and death. He speaks of the soul not as something separate or aloof, but as the quiet pulse within every leaf, every breeze, every kiss. His belief in the interconnectedness of all things grows more explicit and expansive. He is the grass and the worm and the starlight. He is the woman washing clothes and the man whistling on the road. He has become an echo of all things, and all things echoes of him. In these passages, the theme of reincarnation and transformation surfaces again and again. He sees not finality but fluidity. Nothing is wasted, nothing ends. The dust of a soldier's bones will nourish a flower, which will feed a bee, which will carry pollen to another bloom. Life is a chain, endlessly linked. This cosmic optimism, this radical faith in the recycling of being, lends a sense of peace even to the contemplation of decay. It's a soft hymn to the truth that nothing truly disappears. It merely changes shape. Amid this spiritual panorama, Whitman remains grounded in the world of the senses. He doesn't flee from the physical into the abstract. On the contrary, he finds spirit in matter. The scent of lilacs, the feel of warm sun on bare skin, the call of a mockingbird, these are the voices of eternity. He reminds the reader that to be fully present in the body is to be spiritual, to feel hunger and satisfaction, ache and relief, is to be in communion with the divine. He offers no division between sacred and profane. All is sacred if we choose to see it that way. Love too reappears, not in the fierce, raw manner of earlier sections, but with the quiet depth of long companionship. He writes of bonds that surpass understanding, of connections that endure across time and distance. He imagines lovers separated by death still speaking to one another through memory, through air, through the trembling of grass. The soul, he suggests, recognizes what the eye cannot see. In this way, grief becomes a form of devotion, a continued dialogue between those who remain and those who have passed. There are moments when the verse slows to a near whisper. These lines read like prayers, not in the traditional religious sense, but in the form of a soul reaching outward, seeking communion with all things. He walks in the night and listens for the hum of existence. He leans down to touch the earth, to feel the breath of centuries within it. He rides the wind with migrating birds. His body may be bound by time, but his awareness stretches far beyond it. He seeks no heaven beyond the world. He finds heaven here, in every crack and crevice of experience. The America that Whitman carries in his chest also resurfaces, but changed. It is not merely a political construct, but a living body made of its people. His democratic ideal becomes even more spiritual in nature, a great family, united not by law but by empathy. He dreams of a country where the poet, the laborer, the mother, and the prisoner are all equally holy. His patriotism is not nationalistic, but deeply humanistic. It is a love for the common soul of a people, not for boundaries or flags. He also begins to speak of himself less as an individual and more as a symbol, a voice among voices. The I that once stood boldly at the center of the poem now begins to fade, replaced by a collective presence. He becomes you and we. His voice merges with the readers. He becomes the bridge between worlds, the seen and the unseen, the present and the eternal, the self and the other. His ambition is no longer just to be heard, but to be remembered as a touchstone, a gentle whisper in the ear of future generations. And in that vision, there is humility. He does not claim to know all the answers. He does not pose as a prophet above the rest. He is a man observing, feeling, questioning, trusting. His confidence comes not from ego, but from surrender. He trusts the universe to carry his voice forward, to scatter his words like seeds, letting them take root where they will. Whether they bloom in one heart or 1,000, it is enough. This part of the work feels like an offering, not a demand or a declaration, but a gift placed quietly in the hands of the reader. It asks for nothing in return but presence. To sit for a while in silence, to feel the wind on one's face, to remember that in every ending, there is also a beginning. Whitman's voice now drifts into deeper, more profound meditations on the relationship between the individual and the larger cosmos. There is an undeniable sense of completion, yet also an open-endedness that refuses to be confined by earthly boundaries. He moves from the intimate experiences of self and soul into broader, more universal themes, elevating his thoughts to the collective human experience. Here, he expresses his reverence for the simple and the grand alike, reveling in both the material and the transcendent. Through this, Whitman begins to reveal the infinite capacity of the self to expand, to encompass not only the individual but the world, to embrace the vastness of existence with both arms wide open. He writes of the cosmic embrace, that feeling of merging with something greater than the self, yet simultaneously becoming more fully oneself. Whitman's consciousness shifts, not just as a poet, but as a deeply empathetic observer of all that exists. His spirituality takes on a robust, all-encompassing nature. He does not simply reflect on the divine, but actively seeks it in every person, animal, and object. The sacred is no longer something separate from life, but is intertwined with it. For Whitman, the sacred is in the dust, the night, the sweat of labor, the taste of bread. There is no high place, no temple or shrine more sacred than the ground beneath his feet. His connection to the earth becomes an unshakable foundation. He does not merely walk upon it, but is deeply rooted within it, becoming a part of its rhythms. Each blade of grass he passes seems to echo with his own pulse. The metaphorical grass, so central to his work, symbolizes life's fleeting yet recurring nature, something that rises from the earth, experiences growth and decay, and is reborn in time. For Whitman, the natural world is not a backdrop to the human experience. It is an essential part of that experience, a mirror of human life itself. His awareness of nature's cycles, informs everything he touches. Yet, while he is deeply embedded in the earthly realm, Whitman also begins to cast his thoughts into the far reaches of the cosmos. The night sky, vast and infinite, mirrors the expansiveness of his thoughts. He looks upward, seeing beyond the stars to the endless universe, to the innumerable lives lived on planets far from Earth. He perceives time itself not as linear, but as a constant flow, a stream where the past, present, and future collide and coexist. The stars in their distance seem closer to him now, less distant or unreachable, as he imagines them as part of a shared, eternal body. His concept of divinity no longer comes from a singular religious tradition, but from a universal experience, an energy that is present in every living thing, in every star, in the vast infinity that surrounds him. Despite these grand, sweeping thoughts, Whitman is never detached from the human experience. He continues to write about the people he encounters, each person a thread in the great tapestry of humanity. He writes of the working class, the laborer, the farmer, and the soldier, all essential, irreplaceable pieces of the social fabric. His sense of equality and unity drives his poetic vision forward. No person, no matter their station in life, is beyond his embrace. This democratic vision is not just political, it is deeply spiritual. He sees the divine in the simplest of tasks, plowing a field, caring for a child, singing a song, or dying in battle. His poems bring these ordinary experiences to a level of transcendence, showing that every act, no matter how mundane, is imbued with meaning. He reflects on the struggles of life, not with despair, but with a fierce determination to find joy within them. Whitman writes of pain, of suffering, of loss, but always through the lens of the human spirit's ability to endure. There is no sense of martyrdom or victimhood here. Instead, there is resilience. The body may falter, but the soul endures, ever strong, ever present. His writing is not a denial of hardship, but a recognition that even in the darkest times, light can be found. This duality, the acceptance of both suffering and joy, creates a profound sense of balance in Whitman's worldview. In this section of Leaves of Grass, there is a sense of Whitman as a witness. His poems act as a mirror, reflecting back not only the grandeur of the universe, but also the simple acts of kindness, compassion, and care that make life beautiful. He speaks of the intimacy between friends, of love shared without expectation, of the bond between parent and child, between siblings, between lovers. It is these moments of shared humanity, of connection between souls, that give the work its sense of purpose and poignancy. He sees in these moments the true spirit of life, a spirit that is at once universal and deeply personal. But perhaps most striking in this section is Whitman's acknowledgement of the passing of time. Time, in all its enormity, is something he cannot control, and yet it is a theme he revisits throughout the work. He is keenly aware of his own place within it, not as an eternal being, but as a mortal who is fully engaged in the world, living with intention. This awareness of his own transience drives him to make the most of each moment, to cherish every second as it slips by, knowing that each is both fleeting and eternal. In the span of this realization, Whitman reveals the ultimate paradox. While the individual may fade, their essence lingers in the legacy they leave behind. The act of writing becomes an act of preservation, of immortality. He writes not simply for himself, but for all those who come after him, believing that his words, like the eternal grass, will endure. His voice becomes a part of the fabric of time, something that stretches across generations. He envisions a future in which his poems will be read by countless souls, each finding their own meaning within them. This vision of immortality is not founded on fame or recognition, but on a deeper, more organic connection. It is the gift of words that never cease to resonate. And so, in these moments of cosmic reflection, Whitman begins to dissolve the lines between self and other, between the individual and the collective, between time and eternity. He weaves together the various threads of his poetry, body and soul, life and death, the mundane and the divine into a seamless whole. He becomes both a part of the universe and its observer, one with the stars, but also one with the people who pass through his poems, whose lives are reflected in his words. It is in this fusion, this harmony of opposites, that Whitman finds peace. The world as it is enough beautiful, painful, fleeting, eternal. As Whitman continues his exploration of life, he deepens his reflections on the inevitable cycles of birth and death, weaving them into his broader vision of existence. This is where his philosophical musings reach their crescendo, a union of the spiritual and the physical, of the inner self and the vast outer world. In this section, Whitman confronts the ultimate paradox, the tension between human mortality and the eternal spirit. Through these reflections, he seeks to transcend the limitations of the body, embracing the truth that both life and death are essential components of the same experience. There is no division between the two, only an unbroken thread connecting them, like the eternal grasses that bend in the wind and return to the earth. In Whitman's view, death is not an end but a transformation. He speaks of death not with sorrow, but with reverence, even awe, for it is merely a transition to another form of existence. His vision of the afterlife is not based on traditional religious dogma, but rather a continuation of the life force, the soul's energy, which never truly dies. This is a vision rooted in pantheism, an understanding that divinity exists in all things, including the smallest blades of grass and the vast stars above. For Whitman, death is not a termination of being, but a part of the great continuum of life, an essential part of the flow that ties every living being together. His connection to the earth remains central to his worldview. In his poem, he speaks to the eternal cycle of life in which each organism is both unique and part of a greater whole. The plants, the animals, the humans, all are connected in this web of existence. Whitman is adamant in his assertion that the human spirit, like the grass, is resilient. Each blade of grass is as sacred as the soul of man. By identifying himself with the earth and its creatures, Whitman elevates the human experience. The individual becomes both part of the cosmic flow and also an observer of it. There is a humility in this recognition, an acceptance of one's own place in the universe that does not diminish the significance of the self, but enhances it. Yet, Whitman does not shy away from acknowledging the complexities of human experience. He writes of the struggles and pains that come with being alive, suffering, loss, and longing. These emotions are inseparable from the human condition, but they do not define it. Instead, Whitman elevates the emotional experience into a shared moment of connection, a universal aspect of humanity. There is strength in vulnerability, in admitting both the joys and sorrows that come with being human. Whitman recognizes that every person, no matter their station or condition, is bound by this same cycle of life and death. The concept of the self is one of the most profound elements of Whitman's poetry. The self, in his view, is not a fixed, isolated entity, but a fluid, ever-changing construct that is deeply intertwined with the world around it. Whitman's self is not just his individual personality, but the sum of all people, all things, all experiences. It is an expansive, ever-growing consciousness, constantly evolving and integrating new experiences. This expansiveness is evident in Whitman's words, which stretch far beyond the personal to embrace the collective, the universal. His self is at once deeply personal and all-encompassing, reflecting his belief in the interconnectedness of all things. This section of Leaves of Grass also contains a poignant meditation on the relationship between the poet and the world. Whitman's role as a poet is not to be a detached observer, but a participant in the grand, ongoing conversation of life. He sees his poetry as an integral part of the larger dialogue of existence. His words are not meant to be timeless relics, but living, breathing entities that participate in the world. He speaks directly to his readers, inviting them to share in his vision of the world, to see through his eyes, to feel through his heart. The poem becomes a bridge, connecting the poet to the reader, and the reader to the world. Whitman's poetry, therefore, is an act of connection, both personal and universal. He seeks to engage his readers in a deep, emotional experience of life's beauty and its struggle. Through his poems, Whitman shares the essence of what it means to be alive. His work becomes an invitation to join him in experiencing life to its fullest, to embrace both the mundane and the divine, to accept both the triumphs and the sorrows. Through his voice, readers are urged to expand their own sense of self, to see themselves as part of the great, infinite web of existence. Whitman's invitation is one of inclusion. There is no one who is outside the circle of life, no one who is not worthy of being heard. In the poem, Whitman turns to the natural world once again, describing it as a mirror of the human soul. He perceives the leaves, the grass, the trees, and the rivers not as mere physical entities, but as symbols of the eternal flow of life. Each living thing becomes a metaphor for the continuity of existence. The cycles of nature, with their constant renewal, reflect the cycles of human life, the cycles of birth, growth, death, and rebirth. Whitman uses these symbols to deepen the emotional and spiritual resonance of his work, making the natural world an integral part of his poetic vision. This union of the individual and the universal, of the personal and the cosmic, becomes the core of Whitman's philosophy. His work does not ask for passive reflection, but calls for active participation in life's grand tapestry. He invites his readers to stand with him, shoulder to shoulder, and experience the world in all its complexity and beauty. There is no separation between the poet and the reader, between the self and the world. There is only a continuous flow of life, ever-changing, ever-expanding. At the heart of Leaves of Grass lies Whitman's celebration of humanity, its complexities, its triumphs, and its failures. His work stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, to the capacity of individuals to create meaning in their lives, and to the unbreakable bond that ties all people together. Through his poetry, Whitman gives voice to the marginalized, to the forgotten, to those whose stories have yet to be told. He invites everyone to come forward, to claim their place in the world, to embrace both the light and the dark aspects of existence. His work is an anthem of life itself, raw, untamed, and eternal. In the concluding sections of Leaves of Grass, Whitman culminates his vast exploration of self, nature, and the cosmos by presenting a more intimate and spiritual understanding of the poet's relationship with the world. While earlier in the work, Whitman had celebrated the physicality of existence, the transformative power of nature, and the boundless potential of the human spirit. This final section deepens the poet's exploration into the metaphysical. It is not just about observing life, but about embracing a profound understanding of the unity between self and the world. As the poet meditates on the larger themes of death, transcendence, and eternity, there is a sense of finality, an acknowledgement of life's impermanence, but also a hopeful outlook on the legacy of the poet's voice and the ongoing presence of the human spirit. The poet's relationship with death and the unknown reaches its peak in this section, as Whitman expresses a profound acceptance of mortality. Unlike many of the Romantic poets before him, who often saw death as something to be feared, Whitman reframes it as an integral part of life's eternal cycle. He is resolute in his belief that death, much like birth, is simply a transition, an inevitable return to the earth from which all life originates. The concept of death in Leaves of Grass is not something to mourn. Rather, it is a transformation, a reunion with the source of all things. There is no fear in his words, no hesitancy, only a quiet understanding that death is but a return to the infinite, to the eternal flow of life that continues even beyond the individual self. Whitman's faith in immortality, however, is not the immortality of the soul in the conventional sense. Instead, he argues that each individual is, in a sense, immortal because of the way their essence, be it their actions, their spirit, or their voice, ripples through the universe. The poet's legacy is not bound by the body. It is carried through the words, the ideas, and the connections made with others. This immortality is not guaranteed by any divine or supernatural intervention, but through the very act of living and expressing oneself in the world. Whitman's immortality is found in the continuity of human experiences. Each person, in their own way, participates in the eternal cycle of life. By sharing his deepest truths and opening himself to the experience of others, Whitman believes that he transcends time and place. The final section also carries an unmistakable spiritual reverence, although Whitman's spirituality is unconventional. He does not subscribe to any one religion, and his understanding of God is not confined to traditional notions of an omnipotent figure, but rather a pantheistic view, where divinity exists in all things. Whitman sees God in the simplest of objects. He feels God's presence in the trees, the grass, the stars, and the very earth beneath his feet. His belief in the sacredness of life and nature is not a detached, distant reverence, but an embodied one. The divine is not separate from the world. It is, in fact, inherent in the world itself. Every person, everything, every experience is a reflection of the divine. Through his connection to nature and to humanity, Whitman experiences God not as a distant, unreachable force, but as a constant, present presence in his life. This spiritual transcendence is not about retreating into the mystical. It is about engaging fully with the world, embracing its contradictions, and finding meaning within the everyday. Whitman's spirituality is deeply tied to his connection with the physical world. The spiritual and the material are not opposites. They are two sides of the same coin. The poet, in his embrace of both life's earthly pleasures and its spiritual mysteries, offers a vision of wholeness, a sense of unity between the body and the soul, the individual and the collective. He presents a vision of God that is more expansive, more inclusive than any traditional religious structure. Whitman's God is not bound by human definitions. Rather, God is the eternal presence that permeates all of existence. As Whitman draws closer to his own end in life, the idea of legacy becomes increasingly important. He reflects on the power of his poetry to endure, not as a physical object, but as an enduring force that transcends the limitations of time and space. The poet, in his mind, is not merely someone who writes words down on a page. He is a conduit for something larger, a medium through which the collective consciousness of humanity can speak. The poet's task is to connect with others, to express universal truths that resonate across time, to create something that will continue to be meaningful long after the poet is gone. This is the immortality Whitman seeks, not in the physical preservation of his body or his name, but in the way his words continue to reverberate through generations. In this way, the poet is never truly gone, for their spirit lives on in the collective memory of humankind. Whitman also speaks about the human community, his vision of a collective, harmonious whole that transcends the divisions of class, race, or nation. He believes that every individual is worthy of the same reverence and dignity, no matter their background, and that every voice is valuable. This deep sense of equality and the power of human connection permeates his work, and in the final sections, this vision grows even clearer. The poet's work, he suggests, is not just for the intellectual or the elite, but for every person, for every soul, regardless of their station in life. Whitman's democracy is not a political concept. It is a moral one. It is a belief in the fundamental equality of all people and the necessity of recognizing the humanity in one another. In the final reflection of Leaves of Grass, Whitman looks toward the future with a sense of calm confidence. He is at peace with the idea of his own death, and yet he holds fast to the belief that the work of poetry, the work of living, continues beyond him. The world, he suggests, is ever-changing, but it is also eternal. Every individual contributes to the unfolding of this grand, never-ending story. As the poet's voice fades, it becomes part of a greater chorus, one that speaks across time, across generations, and across the very fabric of existence. In the end, Whitman's Leaves of Grass offers a vision of life that is both expansive and deeply personal. It is a celebration of the human spirit in all its forms, its joys, its struggles, its contradictions, and it is an invitation to embrace the fullness of existence. The poet's legacy is not in the pages of a book, but in the hearts of those who read, who listen, and who find their own voices in his words. Whitman's Leaves of Grass is a call to life, a call to love, a call to embrace the beauty and the suffering of the world, and ultimately, a call to transcend the limitations of time and space, to become part of the eternal flow of existence. Leaves of Grass stands as a monumental work in the history of American literature, its power and relevance remaining timeless across generations. Walt Whitman, in his sweeping verses, gave voice to the vastness of the human experience, embracing both the transcendence and the physicality of life. He celebrated the ordinary in all its extraordinary complexity, whether in the brush of a leaf against skin or in the boundless expanse of the cosmos. With a language that defies tradition, Whitman breaks the boundaries of the poetic form, creating a work that is simultaneously deeply personal and universally resonant. At the heart of Leaves of Grass is Whitman's relentless search for unity, the connection between the self and the universe, between nature and humanity, between the sacred and the mundane. His belief in the divinity of all things, in the inherent equality of all people, and in the immortality of the human spirit through connection and expression, paints a picture of a world that is endlessly complex, yet fundamentally interconnected. The poet's body of work is a bold declaration of individuality, but also a profound tribute to the collective, an invitation to each of us to find our own voice, our own identity within the symphony of life. Whitman's emphasis on death is not a melancholic reflection, but an empowering recognition that death is part of the ongoing cycle of life, a return to the infinite. His works invite us to contemplate our own place within the great continuum, to embrace our mortality not with fear, but with a sense of peace and understanding. In this, Whitman transforms death into a celebration of life itself. The individual's life, in Whitman's view, extends far beyond the physical. It is carried forward through the words, the actions, and the legacies we leave behind. The poet's own legacy, he suggests, lies not in fame, but in the enduring power of the truth expressed through his writing. While Whitman does indeed mourn the loss of individuality in a world that often seeks to suppress it, he also urges readers to stand firm in their uniqueness. His message is not about conformity or the pursuit of fame, but about the authentic expression of self in its most raw and honest form. In Leaves of Grass, Whitman offers a manifesto of personal freedom and self-realization, one that challenges readers to reject the prescribed limitations placed on them and embrace their true, uninhibited selves. His poetry is a testament to the limitless potential of human expression and the importance of embracing the fullness of who we are. Throughout Leaves of Grass, Whitman's work is also an echo of his belief in democracy, not merely as a political system, but as a moral imperative. The poet's commitment to equality, to recognizing the dignity in all people regardless of their background or status, challenges us to see one another as equals, to honor each other's humanity. His call for unity is a call not just for individual empowerment, but for collective responsibility, a recognition that the world can only truly flourish when every voice is heard, every story acknowledged. In closing, Leaves of Grass is not just a collection of poems. It is a living, breathing entity that invites its readers to look deeper into themselves, into each other, and into the world. It is a journey through the complexities of the human soul, a celebration of the divine presence in the world, and a call to live fully, authentically, and without fear. Whitman's legacy is his invitation to the reader to find their place in the ever-expanding mosaic of existence, to embrace their own humanity, and to reach for something greater than themselves. The enduring beauty of Leaves of Grass lies not just in its words, but in the universal truths they contain, truths that continue to resonate, inspire, and uplift.